What happens if you give a character like Sonic the Hedgehog a gun? No, that's wrong, and frankly you should be ashamed of yourself for thinking that. Hey friends, Fenris here. Thanks for joining me for the first review since our return from hiatus. I really hope you guys have been enjoying the videos we put out the last couple of weeks, and without further ado, let's begin! 2D platformers are a genre of video games you don't often see in the mainstream gaming markets these days. Sure, they're still present in the indie and mobile markets in some way, and sure, the titan of old, Mario, is still around, but back in the early 90s, platformers were everywhere, especially after 1991. Everyone was throwing their hat into the ring with a mascot-based platformer. Bubsy, Zool, Rocket Knight, even the soft drink 7-Up had a mascot-based platformer called Cool Spot. But one of my personal favorite platformers, as well as the first one I ever played, is Jackrabbit. In the middle of the console wars in 1994, the episodic game Jackrabbit was launched on MS-DOS. I'm sure you're expecting some kind of joke about the interface, how you have to type in commands to start the game. All kids have to do these days are unlock their iPads and tap on Angry Birds or Candy Crush. They will never understand the struggle of the 90s kid. God, I'm such a grumpy old man. The DOS era was pretty important though. Without the need to have your game published on a console, it was like a Wild West of video games. It was an era that was kind to few and left many behind. We wouldn't have Doom today without, well, Doom. So, where did Jazz take his creators? Well, Jackrabbit kickstarted the careers of none other than Arjun Brucey and Cliffy B himself, who would go on to make Unreal Tournament and Gears of War. Hundreds of games have been made with their Unreal Engine. That's pretty impressive. I'd say that's a pretty big deal. Anyway, let's play the game. The story of Jackrabbit is pretty simple. Take the tortoise and the hare, reverse the roles, and put it in space. The evil genius Devon Shell is conquering planets and has kidnapped Eva Earlong, so Jazz has to defeat Devon's army of tortoises and save the universe. Seriously, how did Epic not get sued by the creators of Bucky O'Hare? Starting on the forest planet of Diamondus, we find that Jackrabbit plays quite differently than the platformers we're used to. Where your instinct might be to jump on enemies, your offense actually lies in Jazz's gun. However, Jazz seems to suffer from Mega Man syndrome in that he can only shoot directly ahead of him. His gun does have multiple modes of fire. There's the blaster, which has infinite ammo and again feels similar to Mega Man's default buster. There's the toaster, which fires a large fireball, RF missiles, which shoot 2 rockets, and bouncers, which are like grenades that ricochet. I prefer to stick with the toaster as it seems to have the largest hitbox and ammo is plentiful. The greatest flaw of Jackrabbit is definitely its camera and the immense speed that Jazz can run at. Unfortunately, DOS games back in 1994 commonly only ran at 320 by 200 pixels, which nowadays looks like this. I mean, have you seen Vanilla Doom recently? Anyway, Epic decided to make all the sprites in Jazz look very detailed, which, to their credit, they did a good job. The game looks beautiful, for the most part. However, the camera just feels too zoomed in, and as a result of that and Jazz's speed, you're going to be running into a lot of enemies that you only see a split second before they hit you, which gets frustrating when you can only take 5 hits before you die. In addition to weapons and ammo, you can find bonuses such as a shield, a bird companion, a rare speed boost, and if you find a giant red gem in the middle of a level, you're gonna get sent to a bonus stage which makes the one from Sonic CD look like high art. You'll also find a boss fight at the end of each of the game's 9 episodes. That's right, 9, with 6 levels apiece. I've only been able to complete about half of them myself. You could find yourself playing through it for a long time if you don't get bored first. Quite frankly, as much as I adored this game as a kid, I'm finding it difficult to recommend it today, even with nostalgia. With gameplay and camera flaws, it just hasn't aged that well. The sequel, however, was a vast improvement. Releasing in 1998, around the same time Sonic Adventure had come out in Japan, Jackrabbit 2 released on CD across North America. Say goodbye to DOS. While you got the game in a complete package, the game was still split up into 4 episodes that parodied Donkey Kong, Woodstock, Back to the Future, and... oh... that's too soon. I am so sorry. I gotta say, I love Jazz Jackrabbit 2. The gameplay, while not deviating too much from the previous installment, just feels better. It feels more refined, and because the camera is pulled back, you have less chance from falling victim to cheap hits, and you can actually fire in multiple directions for once. Jazz 2 also offered multiple characters with unique movesets. For example, Jazz has a super jump, and he can use his ears as a propeller to hover, while his brother Spaz has a double jump and a kick attack. There's also a version where you can play as their sister Lori, but unfortunately I don't own that version. With the pullback camera and the higher resolution, you also get to experience the game's impressive aesthetic. I know in 1998, 3D platformers were really starting to hit their stride, but I have a soft spot for high-res pixel art, and much of the game looks like it was hand-drawn. It reminds me of the Worms games, and that's definitely not a bad thing. Like the first game, it's pretty long, as the levels are really expansive. It'll have you entertained for quite a long time. Now, I could talk about other aspects of the game, like the music, which is great, or what little story the game has to offer. But like any great platformer, the most important ingredient is gameplay. And I think it's safe to say that this is the funnest game in the series. If you can get your hands on it, I highly recommend it. You won't be disappointed. Now, those of you who grew up on those 2 games may be confused by what I just said. It's a little weird to call 2 games a series. Well, unbeknownst to me, before I even started writing this review, there was in fact a 3rd Jazz Jackrabbit game in development, and there's even a demo available. Sticking to the PC and programmed in the original Unreal Engine, it seemed Epic started on it immediately after Jazz 2, because it was only 2 years later, in 2000, when it would unfortunately be cancelled when Epic failed to find a publisher. But is it any good? Did we miss out on what potentially could have been a good game? Or were we spared from a shitty sequel? To my surprise, it's not that bad. I mean, what we're seeing here is only alpha gameplay. It's hard to judge it like a complete game, but it's actually pretty fun. It's a 3D platformer shooter, which kind of reminds me of an early predecessor of Jak and Daxter or Ratchet and Clank. It didn't control terribly with mouse and keyboard either, once I discovered how to strafe. My only complaints with it are the graphics, as the textures are really undetailed, and the game has this weird way of rendering shadows with this strange filter effect. Other than that, I'm just disappointed the game wasn't finished. So we missed out on what potentially could have been a good game, and that sucks. The developers must have worked really hard in those 2 years to get this far, and to see all that hard work go to waste, it's pretty disappointing. I'm sure many people thought that was the end for Jazz Jackrabbit. Then in 2002, we got a shitty spin-off on the GBA. This game is not fun. Period. This game just up and ignores the 2 games that came before it. No Devon Shell, no Eva Earlong, no Spaz or Lori. Instead, Jazz is some kind of intergalactic bounty hunter in one of the ugliest cutscenes I've ever seen. I mean, seriously, the GBA was capable of so much more than this. We find that Jazz has been ambushed by an army of chameleons, and they just want to feed him to their king. That's it. Where the tortoise and the hare parallels went is beyond me. Once I was in control, I found the game controlled very poorly. Jazz is super slippery, he runs way too fast, his jumps are too floaty, and like in Jazz Jackrabbit 1, the sprites and environment are rendered far too large, and thus you're susceptible to cheap hits from enemies you saw too late. And in addition to looking and playing ugly, its music is a basic, unappealing loop that makes me want to stab knives into my ears. If you're a fan of the first 2 Jazz Jackrabbit games, please steer clear of this installment. It is not the sequel to Jazz Jackrabbit 2 we were hoping for. After the embarrassment that was Jazz Jackrabbit on the Game Boy Advance, Jazz wouldn't be seen by the gaming community for 8 years, until he showed up in a tutorial for an Unreal Engine dev kit on the Apple iOS as a twin-stick shooter. He hasn't been seen since. And that's the unfortunate end to the Jazz Jackrabbit series. 1 or 2 successes followed by blunder after blunder, only to fade into the void of obscurity that is the mobile gaming market. Unfortunately, Jazz's creators left Epic in 2012 to found Boss Key Productions. Currently, they're working on a first-person shooter called Lawbreakers. Thus, the rights to Jazz remain in the hands of their former company, Epic, which I'm sure will just sit on those rights while they continue to make Gears of War games. However, I cannot recommend Jazz Jackrabbit 2 enough. It is a great game, and I'm sure if you guys got your hands on it, you wouldn't be disappointed by it. Anyways, thank you for watching this review. I'm sorry it took an extra couple days to put together. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you so much to my 200 subscribers. We recently hit that milestone, and I haven't yet had a chance to thank you guys. It means the world to me that you guys want to watch me do this stupid show. If you guys want me to review something else in the future, comment on this video, and I'll consider doing it. And if this is your first time watching me do this stupid show, consider subscribing. We do one video a week, and one of those videos each month is a review in similar style to this. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, see you guys later.